Today, we are speaking with Anne Scottlin. Anne is an emotional well-being specialist, trainer, consultant, best-selling author, and actress, among other things. Anne established the Power of Joy Institute, where she offers workshops and courses around emotional wellness solutions, both for business professionals and for college students. Her book, Live for Joy, blends her insights while giving practical techniques that create her Power of Joy system. Not to mention, Anne has starred in national and international films, as well as television and commercials. I'm really excited to learn more. And thank you for joining us on Fresh Blood. Please, could you tell us a little bit more about your story and getting to where you are today?
Oh, thank you, Jolie. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited to finally meet you.
Here's the big question. How do you create your most authentic, successful, and fulfilling life? The Fresh Blood podcast studies the stories of people over the age of 40 who are thriving in life, finding those core golden threads that connect the underlying successes, those universal truths. I'll be your host, Jolie Downs. Listen and learn from the stories of others to help you soar and live the life that you were meant to thrive in.
Well, where would you like me to start?
Well, tell me a little bit about your upbringing
Sure.
because I actually read that you had an interesting
I
upbringing.
did. I did. Definitely an atypical American upbringing. I grew up in a very right wing religious community. I
Okay.
will not call it the C word, but pretty close to the cult.
Uh-huh.
um, Very extreme right wing Christian, but so non-mainstream, no television, no
Oh,
popular
wow.
music, no fiction. We only ate vegetarian, no dancing, no alcohol, no caffeine, long dresses, very conservative, traditional patriarchal organization of the family. So I was
Wow.
homeschooled until I was 15 and a half, had never been to a regular school.
Okay, fascinating. Because everything is controlled that you've learned at this
Yes,
point, correct?
controlled. And I have had such limited exposure to the world that I
Mhm.
actually don't think it's odd. And I'm a firstborn of three, and also, type A, Capricorn, go getter. So I embraced everything 110%. And I figured if
Mhm.
this is what life was, that I could probably do it at least as good or better than anyone else, including the adults. So I pretty much set off to try.
Yeah, yeah. This is fascinating. So what happened? Because clearly you're not still
Right. Yes. So
along those lines.
so I eventually did get to go to a tiny, tiny, tiny private religious high school, which
Okay.
was not so much different from the way I'd been raised and taught, but at least there were, like 60 or 70 other kids, which was fantastic because I'm
Mhm.
a people person. So I was just like, wow, I'm so excited to be
Yeah,
in
what was that
school.
like for you, being homeschooled and then going into that
Yeah.
situation? Even if it's similar upbringing, what have you, that still has to
Hmm.
feel crazy.
It was
What
weird.
was that like?
It was weird because I guess my whole family has a somewhat social personality to a certain extent. So, like meeting
Mhm.
people, talking to people, that wasn't a problem. What was interesting and surprising was that I didn't really know how the world worked around things like teamwork and misunderstandings and hurt
Mm,
feelings and what failure
mhm.
meant. And being the kind of
Right.
kid I was and the kind of personality I was extremely hard on myself. So if a friend had a spat with you and wouldn't talk to you, or a guy you might like, was distancing, or you felt like you let a teacher down or anything, I took these things very deeply and internally. I didn't know how to
Mm,
separate, I guess what I would call in my mind then failure from just
mhm,
normal social interaction. So that was the hardest
mm.
adjustment. And I started dealing with a
Interesting.
lot of
Yeah,
depression right away. Even though I was having a great time, it was offset
yeah,
by a lot of confusion and sort of deep depression.
yeah, when you said this is your teenage
Yes.
years,
Yes,
correct?
and I'm a
So, I mean
teenager, so oh my god.
so much happening,
Right.
and just in general, to throw you into such a whirlwind
Yeah.
that had to been.
Yeah.
Was there anything that helped you deal during that time
Yeah.
that brought you comfort
Yes.
that might relate to other people?
Yes. So one of the things growing up that I had a tremendous advantage of was living out in nature. When I was born,
Mm,
we were still sort of in a
yes.
town environment, but then we went out to kind of do the extreme rural lifestyle, which kind of very much fit my parents' mindset. And because of that, and I had no other kids anywhere my age, I just spent an enormous amount of time in nature and completely fell in
Mm,
love. Nature became
yeah.
my solace. I still call nature my cathedral. I mean, if I'm really going to go
Yes.
to a place where I'm grounded and centered or whatever I want to call worship, put me in a nature environment, and I instantly something just clicks, like a wholeness comes to me. And I know that it's a bit of a gift because not everyone senses that. I have a baby brother who, well, it's not that he hates nature, but he hates outdoor activities. He hates being away from his
Yeah.
TV or, his drink or whatever. And I'm
Yes.
just like,
I
and we
understand.
tease
Half a
him, we're like,
family
how
members
did you grow up in this family of like hikers and
yeah.
sleeping under the stars and all this kind of stuff? But for me, it was the opposite. I found nature being my solace and really connecting. And right now, why I'm not in my normal studio is because I'm in the Bahamas working a retreat right now. And if I
Wonderful.
leave this house and go down, it goes right on the beach, and I can just sit there with the wind by the
It's the
pool,
best.
and it's about 77 degrees. Just like,
Oh, God, that
I'm
sounds
like,
amazing. I love what you're gonna go do after this.
I know you really do. No, it's amazing, but it's a real gift again. So whenever I get to just be in that environment, it's like, so nature really, really helped me. Also, it may sound funny, but as an extension of nature, I am extremely close to animals, and I think that
Yeah.
was especially domestic pets, obviously, because that's easier. But I think because I lacked sort of social support, I found a huge relatability in animals. So to this, I mean,
Mm,
I still have three
yeah.
dogs. Like that's a healing thing too. I
They're
say
little angels.
yes. I say I don't care what you want to
Yeah.
call them. They're still my emotional support animals. And
Yeah.
if I
Yeah.
don't have a dog, which I didn't for a little while because one of my really dear old friend dogs had passed away, I felt it deeply. Not the loss, but the connection. And
Oh,
I was at
yeah.
peace with him passing. He was 15 and a half.
I was gonna say, how was that? Because I have my first dog right
Oh,
now. I can't
wow.
even imagine. I
Yes.
can't even
And I
imagine.
mean,
I'm like, "Oh god, that's just gonna be horrifying."
yes, it is. And especially like literally, I raised him from a puppy and he was a Labrador and he lived 15 and a half, which was crazy. So he had a very nice life,
Mhm.
but it was just gut wrenching because he had, that's the thing, I really bonded with animals because I felt like they were consistent with me. So in my
Yeah.
upbringing, there was a lot of mixed messages, certain amount of hypocrisy, as you might imagine, and other things like that. And
Mhm.
with the animal, you knew
Mhm.
exactly where you stood. With a dog, there's no lying, there's no beating around the bush, there's no pretense. It's just straight up what they are in the moment, which is just so beautiful to me. Like that's what I want to be anyway. Um,
I completely agree.
so,
Yes.
so
That's such beauty. Mhm.
yes, such beauty. So when I lost him,
Yeah.
about 6 months, I was at peace because he'd had a great life, but I got really depressed and I could not put my finger on it. And then I said, I'm not going to get a dog for like 5, 10 years. I can't go through that separation again. It was too painful. And then I stumbled
Yeah.
across a little homeless dog
Oh,
and ended up
he found you,
being
huh?
completely spontaneous, which I never do, taking the dog home, et cetera, et cetera. And literally within a week, my depression lifted. So I was like,
Uh-huh.
okay,
That's
so now I am learning the tools, and I teach emotional wellness, as you know, and joy. So the tools, one of the tools for me personally to be whole and at peace and grounded is nature, is having a pet, and
Mhm.
particularly for me, a dog that I can just be in my normal space all the time and I can interact with. So those were some of the things that got me
Yes.
through the tough years.
Those are gifts, and that's a gift to know that about yourself too, what it is that brings you that joy,
Hmm.
and I'm completely right there with you. Nature, it's that place of connection. There's just something where everything, for me at least, it brings into perspective of what is important and what is
Hmm.
not. It brings into the wholeness of who I am and why I'm here as to the speck of what I am in this
Absolutely.
grand universe, which really helps put things in perspective. But yes,
And it's
I love it's my therapy as well.
mhm. Oh, I love hearing that because it's
Mhm,
lovely to have a
mhm.
fellow lover of nature. You can just kind of feel that connection, right? Well,
Yes, yeah.
it's a sense of balance amid chaos, I think, for me,
Yes, I
because
like that.
even nature has violence, nature has destruction, nature is wild and tamed, but it also has a certain symmetry and balance. And I always tell my clients, I'm like, part of nature, and I don't call it therapy because I'm not a therapist, but I'm like kind of like your nature
Mhm.
therapy is remembering that you're part of nature. It's not you
Right.
looking out at nature. Nature walks in your shoes. Nature
Right.
sees out your eyes. You are
Yes.
nature. And instead of
Yes.
me versus that, when you kind of
Yes.
embrace your organic wholeness, you really start to find a place of calm that we just don't find
Yeah.
in the normal daily rush of society and
Mhm.
media and people and jobs and money and cars. And you kind of like, this is where I was created to be. The rest is
Yes.
just all on top.
Yes, I love how you put that, it was perfect. Now, I'm
Oh,
curious,
yes.
let's get back 'cause I'm wondering how did you break
Hmm.
what cracked open your mind
Sure.
to see,
Yeah.
what you'd been taught versus what is happening
Sure. No, it was very, so
elsewhere?
I had, very, very, very little exposure of any kind to the outside world. Of course, the only college my parents would let me go to was an extremely conservative Christian, basically a Bible college.
Yeah.
And I decided to take two majors. Well, I'd had a real privilege my sophomore year of high school by kind of a freak of nature because I didn't have a lot of money to go on an international trip to Europe on a study
Oh,
tour for just
wow.
3 weeks. This
Amazing.
changed my life. I
Yes.
was wow.
I can
um
only imagine.
and I had grown up on religious history and certain composite amounts of real history in the sense of has supported religious history. So I
Mhm,
recognized a lot of elements in Europe from, say, Christian history and so on and so forth.
mhm.
And I was just enamored by the art, the architecture, just the
Right.
entire thing. When we got to go to 7 countries in those 3 weeks, and I didn't even know a soul on this trip. I just basically
Mhm.
won a spot, to make it an easy story,
Yeah.
with people all much older than me. I was, I think, 16, 17. And that
Yeah.
literally changed my life. So from that year, every subsequent year in high school, I found a way to travel. Even if I didn't have money, I would coordinate a mission trip. I would recruit other people to go on a history tour because I really started falling in love with history. And I hear your furry friend. So I really got to see a completely different lifestyle. I
World.
started really falling in love with history. And this is what,
Yeah.
and I made sure that somehow I was able to travel to Europe or abroad or something every year after that, even on a limited budget. And so when I did go to college, even though it was a very conservative religious college, I decided to double major. I did the appropriate religion degree, and then I also
Mhm.
chose history. And that
Wonderful.
was the beginning of the crack in the egg, if you will,
Mhm.
because I
Mhm.
started absorbing. I mean, I'm fascinated by sociology, psychology, obviously history, stories, people. And I started seeing how there were parts of history that supported the way I had been raised and what I'd been taught. And then there were parts that didn't fit. Or there were
Mhm.
parts where, when you're in an extreme community, you're taught in an elitist mindset. It might not be
Mhm.
prejudice per se, but it is against other people who don't believe like you. And so I
Exactly.
started realizing, first of all, like, this wasn't the first group that's ever been like this. Like, there've been these situations since all
Uh-huh.
time, that there's a cycle, understanding, my group had a prophet, if you will. So understanding how many other religions and groups have had these expectations that, if they were Christian groups, they had already believed for 2,000 years in like a second coming, that they thought
Mhm.
would happen in their lifetime. So I just kind of started
Yep.
having this mind opening wow moment. And that was kind of the beginning. And I finished both those degrees and was definitely planning to go on to graduate school. And I met my husband in college, and he was of the same faith. And so we got married. I got married really young, 21,
Mhm.
which now just seems crazy, but oh
Yeah.
my goodness, that was what you did. And he was less conservative. He was a little bit more moderate, which was good. But I was so unprepared for the real world.
Mhm.
I went out, I got a job. He didn't want me to travel away. I was going to have to travel part time in order to get the degree I wanted, the post grad degree,
Mhm.
and he didn't support that. That was discouraging. So just kind of getting a local job to make do.
Mhm.
And I guess I just started going through a lot of internal turmoil. Sometimes I was
Mhm.
jealous of some of those other kids that I knew from, say, high school who literally just went off the deep end, went crazy, became party animals. I'm like, I just couldn't do it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was the rule follower. I'm a Capricorn. I mean, what do
yeah.
you want from me? And I'm like, but for me, I'm an intellectual. So everything was sort of like an
Yeah.
agonizing personal crisis, everything,
Uh-huh.
like
Your
way
mind
of
just going.
thinking and like how you behave and dress. And, I think I got my ears pierced when I was like 26 and I felt guilty for years, like there's just sort of this,
Thank you, religion.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So wrestling out a situation and also kind of really lost my identity a bit. I was in love. My husband was a fantastic fighter, but very caught up in his own career. And I just became, oh, so and
Mhm,
so's wife.
mhm.
And if you will, a very
Which
late
happens.
version of sort of a 1950s mindset.
Mhm.
And I kind of got lost in that shuffle, except I always knew that I was born to lead and to teach and to mentor. And I just, it felt really weird. So when I found out eventually that he had very strong sociopathic tendencies, that he had other wives and houses and cars in other states.
Holy, are you serious?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Your husband had other
Yeah.
wives?
Well, other women, some of which he later married, but people he had, he's buying them houses and cars, and
Oh my
one was
god.
pregnant.
How
I
did you
didn't know
find that
that.
out? Holy moly.
um,
I mean,
I
I'm trying
No,
not to
I
swear up and down
know.
because I have a lot
Well,
I'll have
I'm
them
an
back.
actress, so it comes out real easy. So I'll try to contain myself as well. But
No, 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 no. I mean, holy shit, that's what I was saying, like, "Oh my god,
exactly,
I can't
I
even
know.
believe." I don't even
Um, well,
how
I
can
suspected something was wrong for maybe a year, year and a half, 2 years. But I was in a very codependent with him, and
Mhm.
I also believed in the best in everyone. I also didn't know any of the signs of, that kind
Why
of
would you?
gross,
Mhm,
cheating. And I just started having the carrying this sick feeling around in the pit of my stomach just every single
mhm,
day. And he was a very jealous person. Again, he didn't want me to go to grad school because I'd have to spend 2 nights a week
mhm,
away from home. Um,
mhm,
then he started spending long amounts of time away from home because he had to travel for business. And then when
mhm,
I wanted to go get a graduate degree and I wanted to do some original European research. And so one summer I wanted to go to Germany to study German. And he's like, yeah,
good,
sure, go. And I'm like, that does not sound
interesting.
right at all. I had this
Yeah,
really sinking feeling. And in the end, I started getting physically ill. I had bleeding ulcers. I was really a mess. And at some point, I finally just said, "That's it. I'm going to have to find out," because I could not catch him or figure out what was going on. Um,
mhm.
so I had to borrow money from a friend's brother. Like, I had to borrow money from a friend's brother to hire a PI, a private detective, because
Thank you, friend's brother.
yes, because my husband controlled every penny, which
Mhm,
changed, how I relate to money and relationships for the rest of
mhm.
my life as well.
Yes,
um, and just being controlled in every aspect. So from at this
yes.
point in my life, I have never not been in an environment where I wasn't being controlled. Whether
No, you've experienced what it was like to be a woman 100 years ago.
I
I
did.
mean,
I basically grew
really.
up in like
Yeah.
literally like, 1800s
Yes.
looking dresses and in a mindset like
Yes.
that. And then you just go from your parents' house almost to your husband's house and this whole thing. And even though I had more freedom and I had, changed how I've dressed, of course, and things like that, still just didn't really have a grasp. So once it took a while for this detective to even, this guy was good. That's why I say the kind of tendencies, because there's a certain type of person who can reinvent themselves, who can pathologically lie, and they don't feel guilty. They don't even, it just doesn't phase them.
Yeah.
And that is kind of sociopathic. So
Yes.
when he finally was caught, found out, and I served him papers. And of course, you have to remember too, I could have just
Good for
divorced him a
you.
couple years before because I could have said we were just incompatible. We weren't communicating. He was never home. There was something really wrong, all these things.
Yeah.
But I had a moral compass that didn't permit divorce. And
Mhm.
for me, that would
Mm.
basically send me to
You
hell.
felt stuck.
And I would
Mhm.
admit utter failure in my marriage, which
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
do utter failure. So I'm like, that's
Mhm.
not gonna work very well. I'd rather die trying. So
Oh.
so, I finally served in
Oh, these
papers.
stories.
I was nervous. I literally let
I just want to applaud you for that. I mean, for finding those papers. I mean, for hiring the private investigator, for following your gut on that. I just applaud you
oh,
for that. I can only imagine the difficulty of that situation and all of that time
mhm.
period for you. Just really
Yeah. Thank
congratulations
you.
for doing that for yourself.
Thank you. And you know what I learned most was because of the way I was raised, and we all are, but especially because of the ways I was raised, I was very critical and judgmental of people who I felt fall short.
Mhm.
I was
Well, I'm sure you were very critical of yourself, right?
oh, yes,
Yeah, that's where
enormously,
it comes
can't
from.
even
Yeah.
explain, and
Uh-huh.
that is a person that's a personality trait too, especially for me.
Mhm.
So, yes,
I find the people who are the most critical of others are really critical of
yes,
themselves. They're living in their own jail, and
mhm,
they're expecting others to live in that jail with
yes.
them is what's happening.
Totally, absolutely right. And also, though, even from a very conservative religious perspective, if I knew someone who had a failed marriage or got divorced, I wasn't going around being obnoxious, but I had an instant like, oh, well, they didn't try. They didn't think it was
Mhm.
important.
Yeah.
How come they didn't give it their
Mhm.
best? It's just so easy to be judgmental of anyone. I don't care if it's about
Well,
marriage or sex or sexual preference or anything else. If it's something that you personally don't agree with, it's really easy to say, well, there's me versus that.
let's be honest, that's what religion teaches us versus spirituality,
Yes.
which teaches us that we're all one and we're all connected and we're all together in this together.
Yes.
It's not it's all of us together, not an us and them, but
Absolutely.
that's the problem with religion. It does
It does. It's
create
just
an us and
and
them.
it's a big issue, and
Mhm.
for all world religions that want to continue and do good in the world,
Mhm.
these are issues they really need to address and find contemporary solutions to, because
Agree.
if not, they'll eventually just cease to exist. Because
Mhm.
if progressiveness amongst a society that learns to evolve and care and have compassion can't be exceeded by that of the religious organizations in that society, the religious organizations cease to be really relevant. So I say to
Mhm.
them
Mhm.
with a theology degree, be relevant.
Yes.
You need to figure it out, because if that's important to
Yep.
you, then you really have to find a way to be relevant.
So you served your husband
Yes.
papers. I can only imagine just that lost feeling that you
Oh,
must have had.
oh.
I
You know,
where did you go from there, and how did you deal with it?
well, first I went to my parents' house and surprised them completely. They lived in another state, and ended up speaking with just my father. He was the only one home at the moment that I had just arrived from the airport, to tell them what was going on. And obviously, they
That
didn't.
must have been so hard.
It was. I was very grateful they didn't. They were grateful for my safety, because there'd been some issues
Good.
of concern. They were grateful that I was fine. So there was
Good.
support in that regard, like, you need to be safe.
Good. Yeah.
However, you know, um, this family member said to me, well, my father, since I already said it. So he said to me, though, so you realize, if you feel like you need to get divorced, clearly you have, religious justification to get divorced if in our environment. As long as you realize, you'll still always be married to him in heaven.
Oh, I have so much to say about that, but go ahead.
And I'm just, I didn't say anything, because what can you say when you're
Yeah.
still, I mean, I understood where he was coming from. I
Yeah.
didn't, it hurt like heck, but I didn't judge him for trying to be cruel. It was just him trying to help me understand, based on his worldview, how
It's his
things
worldview,
worked.
yeah.
But I was
Mhm.
just so also kind of incredulous, and this, and also reactions I had from the religious community I'd been in, even in my hometown where I'd been living with my husband, were, with exceptions, there were some really incredible people who stepped up. But in general, from an organizational standpoint, I got no support, mostly criticism. The only solution would be reconciliation, all these things. And
Mm.
I'm like, when do you guys lose the common sense that you were born with, your
Yeah.
God-given
Mm.
common sense? When did
Mhm.
that just go out the window, and you go back to a cut and dried text of some kind from thousands of years ago and say, this applies to everybody all the time?
Yes,
I'm
it
just,
does.
I mean,
Just
and I don't even mean to be blasphemous. I mean, so
no,
truly,
it's
explain
not.
that to me. You know what I mean?
Yes, it is common
I mean,
sense.
would you do this to your dog? No. I mean,
Exactly,
are you serious? Like, would you
exactly.
do it to yeah, so what is done often in the name of religion that hasn't learned to forgive and encompass lovingly is criminal.
Mhm,
And that's hard for me to
mhm.
say because I'm still a very deeply spiritual person, as you are, and I
Yeah, I am
recognize the
too.
value of
Yeah,
spirituality,
yes,
obviously.
completely,
Um,
completely.
so so then I really did
Well,
have an existential crisis because
yeah.
I was like, "Oh crap, like I lost I already lost my identity. I didn't get to fulfill my career that I wanted. The only person I'd ever really, really been in love with has just like utterly abandoned me. And now
Mhm.
I don't even know if I believe what I grew up in, which was my only source of
Right,
hope and
God.
faith, because I'm not getting any support there at all. I'm getting criticism and I'm being told that I did something wrong. And I just don't, how do you function? And I isolated badly I
Mhm,
basically did leave my house for a year. I quit
mhm.
working.
Oh,
I
so
watched a
tough.
lot of TV. There were two or three women in particular who did check on me, who were,
Mhm.
instrumental in making sure I was okay. But I was so humiliated by my failure in life.
Oh, God, I'm so sorry you felt that way. That was such a to me, that's such a win, that was such a
I
power
know, right?
moment,
And
you
I didn't
know?
see that at all. I just
Yeah,
thought,
I know, it sucks, I'm sorry.
I never had a full-time job all by myself. I don't even know if I can
Mm,
support myself. I've never lived by myself. I moved from my parents' house to the dorm to my
and
husband's
that's
house the day I got
scary.
married. I
Yeah, no, that's a big deal.
What am I supposed to even do in the world? Who am I? I have no idea what my sense of identity is anymore because if anything it was always wrapped up in my religion, my parents, my family, my husband. So now what? Uh,
Yeah,
so I decided to move back across the country to where I was originally from because at least I had a few friends on that side.
mhm, okay,
One in
yes.
particular, I literally picked a city where I had one friend. I'm like, well, at least I'll have
The
one friend
yeah,
because
yeah.
it was very painful, as you know, in any broken relationship. And
One friend can
it
make
can
all
make
the
all the
difference
difference. I
too.
mean, my ex had been well
Mhm.
known in our community. It was just excruciating to just kind of be seen in public.
Fresh
Yeah,
start
I said,
is
"That's it. Fresh
probably
start,
yeah,
good, bad, or indifferent," but that was a survival mechanism, and I said, "I'm
yeah,
gonna do it." So I moved across the country, closer to family, not too close, but closer to family,
yeah.
closer to family and with friends, and, just sort of settled down and got a grip, went back to grad school, which had been my dream for ages anyway.
So you got to go back
Got
to
to
your
go back to my
dream.
dream, start
Mhm.
pursuing that, and
So you got to
yeah.
start asking yourself what it is that you wanted, and really figure that out. Because I would imagine you probably hadn't asked yourself that in a long time.
No. I didn't really know that I deserved to have what I wanted.
Wow, isn't that
And
amazing?
what's amazing to
And
me now,
is that so many people feel that
yes,
way?
that's what I was going to say. It's what's so
Yeah,
amazing to me now. And this is just, one story. So many people feel that way. And,
yeah.
I'm this age now, but there are still kids being raised like me in America right now. And if you don't
Yes.
believe it, someone who is significantly younger than me, go read the book Educated. And I just forgot her
Oh, I
name.
loved that book. Oh, it was so
I
good.
cried the whole
So good.
book. I had goosebumps the whole book because while her story was a more violent and slightly more extreme version than mine, so much of the programming and the messaging was
Mm,
so close and so relatable. It was traumatizing. And a couple of my friends who
yeah.
grew up with me or, around that time in high school, I've sent the book to, also almost couldn't read it. It was so traumatizing for them. But
Mm,
understanding this isn't just a one-off anomaly, like this stuff is still happening.
yes.
I've seen sprouting up on the web, and I'm not currently affiliated with any of these, but support groups, podcasts, YouTube channels just around supporting and rehabbing extra conservative kids who are now decided they want to go out in the real world and have a life
Oh,
and
good.
don't have
Oh,
anyone to
good.
turn to, don't have anyone to ask for advice. Some of them are homeless living in their cars. They don't have anywhere to start. So this is a
Oh, it's
special need. Like
heartbreaking.
if anyone happens to be
Yeah.
listening to this and shares any version of
Yes.
my story, this is a special need that could really find a place. And this is something that I go to other countries. they can't even process when I share my story because they're like, we grew up watching Baywatch in this developing country, and you didn't have a television until you were 22?
No, it's mind blowing. Like all of the things that so much pop culture, you know.
Like, they just don't even know what to do without it.
You know the 80s
You're
movies.
American? Really? Yes. Oh,
No, it is. It's
it is.
crazy. And I'm really glad to hear that there are a lot of new resources that are popping up
Mhm,
for people. It's clearly
mhm.
it's very
Yes,
needed.
no, absolutely.
So so you started going back to graduate school. You started kind of asking yourself those
Mhm,
questions, really dipping your toes in the
mhm.
water, I would imagine,
Yes. No, yeah.
and figuring things out. So tell me about that time. Like,
Mhm.
where did you go? How did you figure
Yeah.
things out for yourself?
So, I was really still struggling with depression, even though I'd moved. Depression
Hmm.
was really bad, still dealing with physical health issues just from full breakdown. And after another year or so, I just realized I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't just be in breakdown forever. But I didn't feel like I had any strength left either. So what
Hmm.
do? You feel empty and broken. If you
Yeah.
feel broken but strong, you can push through. But that
Yeah.
was gone. I was just kind of like a wet noodle. I'm like, I don't even know. I have no motivation. And
Seriously.
a mentor of mine had said, and now, I mean, I tell this to anyone who's in that situation. They said, if you feel really stuck, go find a way right now to give back to others, very
Right.
specifically. Get
Right.
out of your own
Hmm.
head, get out of your own house, get into a space. So I went out and literally just joined up with one of my local Amnesty International groups. I started doing petitioning, especially for international women in developing countries who had no freedoms or were being held against their
Wonderful.
will. Interesting little
Wonderful.
connections. Mine might have been psychological and
Uh-huh,
mental. Theirs
uh-huh.
might be physical or more. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, I had purpose again because I'm like,
Mhm.
no, that is not okay. I have something to fight for again. And what I also started realizing was, and this is just my own personal take on it, was I can do my best to improve their life and their situation. At the same time, if they were me, if they had my opportunities, I guarantee they would say, "Go do it, girl. Go
Yes.
do it. We
Yes.
would love to do it. Be our token. Go fulfill
Right.
your dream. Go to graduate school.
I love
Stop
this.
being fearful and do it, because guess what? You can. We can do it for us if nothing else."
Yeah.
And that also pushed me out because
Mm.
I'm that personality that it's easy for me to do something for someone else, but it's harder to do it for myself, right?
Yeah.
Lots of us are like that.
I understand you.
Yes. Yes. So I really ran with that. And about the time I was finishing graduate school and I wanted to be a professor, I studied medieval history, by the way, just to be
I'm fascinated by
completely
that, by the
unique and
way.
different.
There's so many
Oh,
avenues that I could
yes.
go down here.
Okay. So for another coffee, because
Yeah.
I wrote my thesis on, I've always been a writer. I wrote my thesis on medieval women writers specifically.
Ooh.
And the
Ooh.
university created an award from scratch for that thesis because it was
Oh my god, that's
exceptional.
amazing.
And I still
That's
plan to
amazing.
adapt that into a regular popular book sometime in the near future, I hope. So,
Oh, I would absolutely buy that book.
yeah, okay, good. It's
Mhm,
fantastic. I mean,
mhm,
you talk about women with odds against them who still had
mhm.
something to say. That's
I
that. And you know
I
why?
wanna hear
And
that.
I have to tell you
Mhm.
this one piece because your listeners will
Yes, tell
appreciate
me.
this too. So the reason we know they were women and not men, even though they wrote books that, like, there's no way a woman could have written that book. In that
Mhm.
environment where women weren't permitted to write, etc., no man in his right mind would ever put a woman's name on his book
Oh, yeah,
because
no.
no one would
Mm-mm.
ever read it. So we
Nope, no
know
one would.
these were women that wrote these books because they were the only people crazy enough to actually take their lives in their hands to get their message out, right? um, so right about the time I was graduating, we were in the middle of the recession, and there were no jobs.
Good time. Good time.
All the
Yeah.
people who've been doctorates for 10 years were getting laid off.
Uh-huh.
I was like, well, then now what? And I was walking through a classroom building one day, and at the end of the hall, I have these, collegiate bulletin boards with all the pins in them and all the different colors of papers and flyers. And there was one in there for a casting call. I was like, huh, that's interesting. I'm like, well, maybe I can make some money on the side doing something like acting. I don't know. What am I supposed to be doing with myself right now?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
little did I know. But anyway, make money on the side. So I was like, well, why not? I mean, I did write my first play when I was 10. I mean, granted, it was just my family and like a couple of friends from church who came, but I did do it.
Yeah.
It was a
Yes.
religious play. It was
It's
a
in the
Christmas
blood.
play. How could you go wrong with that? I did cast
Yeah.
myself as Mary, of course. Um,
Of
of
course.
course. But yeah, so I'd always loved stories. So I said, I don't know let's go see what nonsense this is about. So I called, I went in, and it turns out it was for the ancient Greek play Lysistrata, which I don't know if you know anything
Uh-huh.
about, but
No.
it's a like 500, I'm guessing here, guys, BC Greek play
Oh, wow.
about powerful women.
Ooh, that's interesting. That's, like, right
Lysistrata.
up your
Oh
alley
my
too. I
god,
mean,
yes.
yeah.
I mean, Lysistrata in an environment where the women are like, "We need to take back some power and fix our country." So, pretty
Yes.
dramatic, pretty amazing. Of course, it's this massive play, basically in all, like, old school, well, even though it's translated from Greek, it's in old school English. It's kind of
Mhm.
Shakespearean. It's very awkward. Somehow, by some chance, I landed the part, and it was for a small production. So my first acting gig ever was Lysistrata on the stage. Oh my gosh. But I started really
That's
enjoying it.
I feel like that's auspicious. I like that.
I think so
I like
too.
that a lot. Yeah.
So this is where, as you said, actress came into
Yeah.
my personal rehab program of getting out
Mhm.
into life. And pretty soon I was like, huh, maybe I should like join a class. Maybe I should get some headshots. Maybe I should get an agent. And I started finding it to be therapeutic, which I've also met many other
Mhm.
people now in that industry who have had similar experiences with finding it to be therapeutic, in particular for someone who never felt they had a voice. Now
Mm,
you can have a voice and you can't get in trouble for it.
right.
Now you can play any character, good, bad,
Uh-huh.
indifferent, skanky, doesn't matter. You can play any character and get
And you cannot get in
affirmation for it.
trouble.
And the more in deep you go, the more affirmation you get. And I was like, this is really interesting. So it was a real fun way of self development. I was very blessed to get some exceptionally
Mhm.
good teachers. At the time, I was in San Francisco area, and then of course moved to LA, and who really, a couple of them had really deep insight into how much the whole person. So if you was like a holistic healer teacher, not
Mhm.
everyone did, but there was one or two teachers who really had a holistic approach to teaching the craft, which was
Mhm.
what you have in here and in here affects what you bring to the
Right.
stage, what you bring to the set. And so realizing that, for example, I had no conflict resolutions, no conflict uh, talent at all. I don't know
Mhm.
how to I didn't know how to have a really bad argument because I'd always been taught
Mhm.
that having a big argument or blowout wasn't good. You know, I had to learn how to get angry. Of course, I had all this inner
It's
angry, bleeding
interesting.
ulcers, everything going in,
Yeah.
compressing, compressing,
Mhm.
compressing. But
But you
I
didn't know how to
was
deal with it
terrified
outwards.
of expressing it.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously realized that I had enormous amounts of rage that I didn't even know was there. And so
Really neat.
is
Did that
yes,
help get out
it
by acting
did.
and learning that?
It was
Yes, good.
traumatizing though, but it did help. Like it was really hard. It was going against so much of my programming in so many ways. But this was
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of my unofficial therapy. And I mean I did get some traditional therapy too, just to clarify as we go. But
Yeah.
um
Big fan of traditional
yes, but
therapy.
it was a tremendous opportunity to be creative for the first time because, you know, the arts weren't really encouraged in my environment growing up for obvious
Mhm.
reasons. You had, you know, just kind of like basically you're going to be a missionary one way or the other. That's how it works.
Well, it seems to me like a joyful therapy
Oh
almost,
yeah.
ti I mean, with
Yes,
your whole it's a joyful way to get
it
some
was.
personal
It
therapy,
was.
kinda like when I drive Highway 1 with good
Yes.
music.
Oh yes. Oh, and a good car that helps too.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yes, and also for the first time, really getting to immerse myself in like-minded creatives. I
Mhm,
never had the
mhm.
luxury of being surrounded by like-minded creatives, people who like
Oh, that's
stories and
big.
creation, and people who, I mean, I'm an empath, you know, people who had those kinds of deeper
Mhm.
feelings and emotions. And it wasn't just a business mind, although I can do that too, but it
Yeah.
was more like it didn't have to be religious to have soul to it.
No, they're, like, contributing to
Depth.
your energy,
And they're
essentially.
and they're trying to tell stories to impact society in positive ways
Yeah,
without an overarching, agenda. Now,
yeah, that's
sometimes people
great.
do use it in a, media
Mhm.
as an agenda, obviously for film, television, theater, but not as like the whole overall purpose. It wasn't like you had to join a certain religion or a certain sect,
Yeah.
but it was more tell stories to open minds. And as soon
Mhm.
as that
Which
kind
I
of
love.
I embraced that, I was like, "Oh yeah, tell stories to open minds. I'm really into that."
Yeah. I am too, clearly.
Mhm.
So, okay, so tell me more. So where did you go how did you, go from actress
Mhm.
into this next realm of I mean, because this whole you have this whole study of joy and creating this joy institute, your book, The Art of Joy. I mean, you're a joy expert, you're a
Yeah.
joy consultant, which I love, by the
Oh,
way.
thank you. Me too.
That's the feeling I'm always trying to tap into, when it's like,
Mhm.
"What do you wanna feel today?" It's joy.
Mhm. No, that's
So
amazing.
so how did this happen? Where did that
Yeah.
come to be?
Yeah, so I had always known I had teaching skills, mentoring skills. I mean, even way back when I was quite young, like in my religious environment, I mean, I was teaching like adult church classes by the time I was 12. Like I
Right.
had a gift, you understand? I had a gift and I knew how to use it. And
Yeah.
so as I got more and more into acting, I was studying with a studio who trained me to become a teacher, and in particularly started teaching the business side of acting because I did have business training and experience to a certain
Mhm.
extent, and a lot of creatives don't have.
Mhm.
How do you run your artistic business as an entrepreneur? How do you make money? How do you take care of yourself? So I ended up teaching classes around that and also doing a lot of one-on-one coaching, and fell in love with coaching and realized that was one of my,
Great.
heartfelt gifts right away because I love
Oh, isn't that
nurturing
great to
and
find?
mentoring. Yeah.
Mhm.
And started realizing that it was more than business coaching. It really became whole person coaching because a lot of
Mm.
these actors, they're driven and they know what they want to do a certain thing, and they don't have family that support them, or they don't have, like, emotionally, even like they're against it, or they don't
Mhm.
have any money at all, or I mean a million of other issues. And so I really started falling in love with coaching and kept doing that for several years. And after a while I said, I'm going to keep coaching creatives because they're amazing and I love it, but in order to make a living, because most creatives don't have a ton of money, including me,
True.
um, I think I better go get certified to do corporate training and teaching as well so that I can just
Smart.
have an income, and started teaching my students that as well. Like,
Mhm.
how do you have a balanced lifestyle? If you want to be a creative,
Mhm.
let's create a business plan for your life so you can support your
Right.
dream. And when your
Mhm.
dream starts making more money than your day job, then you can switch. That was my
Yes, this
message.
is what I that is the message.
Yes.
Yes, that's the message. Find the thing you love, start doing it now on the
Yes.
side, and as it grow I mean, eventually as it grows, you never know where it'll lead,
No,
and eventually it could lead to, you quitting your current job and you going that way, or it could lead to other
you
things,
never know.
but it will bring more joy.
Yes, it'll be more joy. And let me tell you,
Mhm.
having met many in Los Angeles actors who were living in their cars, who didn't have
Mm.
enough money to even get the headshots that they needed in order to get an agent,
Yeah.
in order to get a acting job. It is
Yeah.
not fun to be a broke artist. And
Mhm.
if you really want to go in it for the long term, that is absolutely how you want to go in it. And it doesn't matter how much of a right you think you have to be an artist. If you want to be a miserable, starving artist, that's your choice. But I say, let's be an empowered option artist. Let's
Yes.
have options. Besides, when you have that balance, you meet other people in your other careers.
Mhm.
So, yes, absolutely agreeing with you on the message. So what I did is I went to up to Santa Barbara. They have the Executive College of Coaching there. So I studied there for a year so I could
Great.
get my executive certification, be able to coach and teach and train.
Mhm.
So that was
Wonderful.
then I was kind of working on my niche, and I started realizing that the pursuit of joy had become my focus. It had been with me my whole life, even when I didn't know it.
Mhm.
Because one of the interesting things of being raised in an extreme religious or conservative environment was that one of the signs that you were doing it right was that you would be very joyful about it.
Mhm.
But I found, even as a kid who could detect hypocrisy and everything else, like right there, that I would go around with my smile on my face, but I wasn't happy. I was deeply depressed a
Mhm.
lot of the time, and that this joy was a put on, a mask I put on. It
Mhm.
wasn't authentic, because
Yeah.
I didn't have any, like, I wasn't being who I was meant to be. I was
Mhm.
being a pawn in someone else's board, and it wasn't fun, but I
Yeah.
had to pretend it was fun. Like, this is BS, not doing this.
Yeah.
And then through my training, my marriage, all of that. And so I said, yeah, I mean, I differentiate just for my own purposes and branding between happiness and joy, just to create a little distinction, because they're clearly first cousins. But for me, happiness has been a little used and abused in media, in marketing. It's all about what you have and what clothes you have, and if you're right with the right
Mm,
significant other, and what kind of car you drive, and what kind of job you have, and either you're happy or you're not. Whereas
right.
joy is more of an intrinsic energy. Joy is something you were born with,
Mhm.
even as a baby and a toddler, when you just kind of,
Mhm.
most people had joy. You could just bubble up and laugh and didn't care who was watching, right?
Yes.
So that's there. So how do you tap back into that? And because this had literally become my own life study, I said, and I know what I'm talking about because I've been working on this my whole life. And now that I'm
Yes.
an expert in emotional wellness, this is a perfect fit, because I can't
Mhm.
think of anything I'd rather do than bring joy to people's
Right.
lives and teach them how to keep it
No,
and share it.
that's wonderful. That's a
So,
very worthy purpose.
so that made me joyful, right? Because when you share
Yeah.
it, you get more yourself, which is, the beauty
Yes.
of the whole principle. So that's kind of how that evolved. And then where I am today into, books, training, and workshops, and retreats, and all the rest of it. And even being here in the
Oh, it's
Bahamas today.
right? So you're doing retreat in the Bahamas.
Yes.
That's a wonderful goal to have. I'm gonna put that on my vision list.
Yes. Do that. Do that. No, that's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you've done a lot with your life. I mean, so many amazing things. What would you say has been your greatest success and why? And
Mm.
what did you learn from it?
My greatest success, and I would say, and it's ongoing too, is learning to love and forgive myself.
Oh, such a good one. So hard and so important, right?
Yeah.
How did you do it? Or is there any advice that you could give someone who might be struggling with that themselves?
You're not going to like it. You really have to stop caring what other people think.
Yeah,
And that is so hard, but it's not
it is.
impossible, because let me tell you, every time you say no, because I'm going to take care of me, you say no, because my emotional wellness is more important than being on that extra board or doing that extra thing or running a million miles an hour and never having time to be still or meditate or just have my own sanity. Every time you
Mhm.
say, I am important and I am worthy, you are breaking one piece of that shackle that has been holding you your whole life. So if every day you do one thing to remind yourself that you're worthy, to remind yourself that we have all done the best we could where we were at and with the tools we had. We have
Yes.
all made mistakes, but that doesn't mean we're
Yes.
a mistake.
Mm-mm.
It
Mhm.
means that you have now the power to change and learn and evolve. And the more you put your focus on nurturing others and leading by example, by taking care of yourself, learning to be gentler and kinder to yourself, the more you will
Yes.
really be able to stretch your wings and fly. And there's nothing like that
Mhm.
feeling.
Mhm. So true. I admit I had the same, shackles, my entire life. And it was only in the past few years that I learned a forgiveness meditation that taught me
Mm.
how to forgive myself
Mm.
and forgive other people. But that first step of forgiving yourself, wow, I mean, it was like a whole new person.
Mhm.
It was a life-changing thing for me
Oh,
by far. It does, it frees you from those shackles of your past that can come up and just claw at
oh.
you and pull you back down,
And I
you
would
know?
love to get that meditation from you at some point. So please,
Oh, yeah,
share that when you
I
can,
will
because I
share.
would absolutely love it. Sounds like a perfect thing. I would so enjoy doing that.
Oh, I'll definitely share that with you.
Because we
S
do, when we say, well, not everybody feels like they need to forgive themselves, but let me explain what that means. One is, I was born type A perfectionist, a little
Mhm.
OCD, yes, a lot of OCD. So to me, I feel like I fail constantly. So first of all, you start with that. Actually, look at the two sides of the coin. The things that are all my weaknesses, the flip side of that coin is also the things that are my strengths. I am
Yes.
determined, I am persistent, I am powerful, I am resilient, and I'm a little OCD and hard on myself. But can we put this in perspective and see the
Exactly.
balance? Yes,
Yeah.
I have grossly disappointed my parents. That's a hard one to forgive yourself for because you still love your parents, you know?
Mhm.
But actually, in the last 5, 6, 7 years, I've worked through that one too, where now I can have an
Good.
open, and my parents are the same, by the way. They have not changed their lifestyle or
Mhm.
any perspectives. Um, where I can have an open, friendly, loving relationship with my parents,
Mhm.
know that they did the best they could with the tools they had, and
Yes.
forgive myself that, I did cause them pain, but it doesn't that I
I think that's so
tried to
beautiful.
cause them pain. I
Mm-mm.
disappointed them. I didn't aggressively hurt them on purpose. There's a difference. Sometimes
Yes.
parents make that confusing when they talk, "Don't hurt me. You're hurting," right? You know what I'm talking
Yes,
about.
yes, I know exactly what you're talking
So,
about.
but don't take it on, or learn to peel
No.
off those layers and give them the gift of your love. You don't have to
Mhm.
forget what has happened, but you can forgive them just so you can be healthy, if nothing else. Maybe not because
Exactly.
someone deserves it, but because so you can be healthy and whole. Because that's what's really
Exactly.
important. That's about loving and forgiving yourself.
Yeah, yeah. It's understanding that we all I mean, everyone has their own issues, and
Hmm.
the parent thing, it's like, if your parents are making you feel like that, it's often their own issues that
Hmm.
they're dealing with and not yours, and learning to understand that and learning how to own your own your own business and let go of anything that is not yours, that's a really big lesson, right? To that is a very freeing feeling once
Hmm.
you learn that, to let go of everyone else's expectations and needs and just focus on yours. It's that changing that one thing inside of yourself, even though you can't change everything around you, but making that shift inside of yourself allows you to deal with everything else and move forward in ease and flow
Hmm.
is what it
I love
is.
that.
Now, I'm curious, what would you say is your definition of success? And
Mm,
based on that, what do you think is key to having continued success throughout life?
mm. Yeah, it's a really good question. What is success, and what is the key to continued success? Um, I think success is there's so many definitions, but quite honestly, it's for me, it's just being true to myself.
Mhm.
Um, do I feel like I have a vision and a calling and a purpose? I do. Do I pursue it and develop it constantly so that it's clear to me what that is? I do. Um,
Mhm.
and when you're clear on that, or you get clear on that, or you get support or a coaching or a friend or someone to work with you on that until that gets really clear, then you're going to be a success regardless. So for me,
Right.
giving back and helping others and helping other people that are in a stuck place, that's very motivating to me. And
Mhm.
when you can wake up in the morning, and I can honestly say that I do this, I've got all my own issues and problems, right? But when I wake up in the morning, I know that in small ways, I have already touched so many lives, whether that's in person, whether that's in social media. I mean, the people who have written to me, all of those
Yeah.
things, I'm like, my life is already full. I've
Yeah.
already made an impact on other people that has literally changed the course of their life, not because I'm
Mhm.
so amazing, but because I made sure that they had information and tools and motivation and
Yeah.
love and kindness. And they knew someone cared, someone they'd never even met on social media, someone they had no idea who they
Mm.
were. Right. So I can wake up and say, I'm already complete with that I'm already a success. What I do from
Yeah.
here is a luxury because I just want to keep doing that more.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so perfect. That was perfect. And being a joy expert, I'm curious if you do you have any specific habits or things that you do that help bring more joy into your life that you would
Yes.
suggest for others?
I do, and I will also say that you really should make your own list. So,
Right.
because
Right.
everyone has a different we're all different, no one diet fits
Mhm.
all, that whole thing.
Yes. True, true.
So, when you're in happiness, when you're in joy, when you're in a good place, what's going on around you? What are you doing? And I consciously did this a few years back to like start tracking it. One thing I
Mhm.
realized
Good
that I
idea.
didn't do, because I can be one of my tendencies, I can go into be workaholic pretty easy. So
Mhm.
one of the things I realized was that I just completely forgot to ever listen to music. And there are, my kinds of music really speak to me. They make me
Yes.
happy, they make me warm, they make me feel supported, they take my stress down about 30% just turning it on.
Mhm.
And I'm like, why would I not be doing that? That's like, so I started putting sticky notes wherever I was, like my phone, my laptop, my ear pods, whatever, like play music at least every day, sometime. Like that's
Yes.
such a small change to give you,
Yeah.
reduce some tension, give you joy, find you dancing in the kitchen once in a while. I mean, that's
Yes,
amazing. That's
yes.
a really
Uh-huh.
basic way to start. But so for me, that was one. Another one was your finding your, and identifying your creative outlets that bring you joy. It doesn't have to be fancy.
Right.
You don't have to be
Mhm.
Michelangelo. I like
Mhm.
gourmet cooking. It gives me endless joy. If I have time, I could cook for 4 hours and just love every minute.
Yeah, the people around you love that
Yes.
too.
And so that's not for everybody, but what is your thing? Is it gardening?
Yeah.
Is it, there's something really healthy about working with living things like plants. Um,
Mhm.
Living animals, as I already said, animal therapy,
Right.
dog therapy, having a relationship like that in my life is really important. Nature, as we already talked about, and your own spiritual practice, whatever that is, doesn't have to be religious, but when I made a ring right after my divorce, and since then, just to say, very gratefully found and married
Mhm.
a wonderful soulmate who I am so glad that I met and would have never met if I hadn't gone through the
Wonderful.
divorce. So we've been married now for
Right.
several years. But when I got divorced the first time, I made a ring from Shakespeare that I wore where I used to wear my wedding ring at the time. And it
Mhm.
says, "To thine own self be true."
I love that. Oh, I feel like every woman should have one of
What
I
I wore
love
instead of
that.
my wedding ring, and I have always, that's kind of been my mantra ever since. So find your
Mhm.
joy, to yourself be true, and know that if you are doing the things that make you happy and you still feel unsatisfied, it's probably because you're not giving back. So
Mhm.
start
Right.
sharing the joy. Start building up other
Exactly.
people, because if you can't get a hold of your joy, I go against the people who say you have to have it to give it. That's not my philosophy. My philosophy is you share it and you start receiving it. You
100%.
manufacture a little joy and share it with someone on the street, or someone, a
Mhm.
smile at the cafe or whatever. You start getting it back in spades. So start
Yes.
sharing it and you will start getting it.
That is an absolute universal truth, and that is something that I have learned through every one of these conversations. It is the golden thread
I love that.
through all of these stories. So yes, you're absolutely right. If you are doing all of those things and you still aren't able to find your joy, that is the missing ingredient. Thank you for pointing that out. Very true. And I'm curious because you know a lot about joy, clearly. I'm curious if there's any video or talk or book or movie that has had a really big impact on your life
Mm.
that you think might benefit other people.
You're gonna laugh. So I'm gonna tell you, my favorite movie was also, I didn't see many movies, mind you, because I didn't have a television. But
Okay,
one
so now I'm curious.
okay. So when I was like 10, we were briefly visiting my relatives, which I didn't do much because they weren't part of our inner circle.
Uh-huh.
Too distracting, too worldly. I was at my grandma's house, and it was the first time I'd ever seen The Sound of Music. Now I was a little
Oh, I love
kid.
the sound of music.
I loved music because that was allowed in my
Yes.
environment. I did have music, religious music, but anyway, and the vision of this woman in nature spinning around with her arms out and just singing "The
Yes.
Hills Are Alive" with The Sound of Music. This became my picture of freedom, empowerment, what it means to fight on the side of good versus evil, even when you have conflicting issues,
Mhm.
resiliency, persistence, love. To me, that just embodied kind of everything that I wanted, and to fight for fight for others. That embodied really what I think I built a lot of my life upon. It had such a tremendous
I
impact.
love it. One of my favorites. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel it all. Yes. Thank you for that.
Yes.
That's so good. So before we wrap up, just so people know where to find
Mhm,
you, if they want to go get your
mhm.
book, find out information about your coaching and training and things of that nature, where can they go find you?
Yes. So easiest, you can go to my website, which is AnneScottlin.com. That's my name, and it's
Perfect.
ANNESCOTTLIN, AnneScottlin.com. You can find everything there, including the book, or you can go straight on Amazon. The book is called Live for Joy, and it's a personal empowerment book with a twist. If you only have 1 or 2 minutes, you can get your dose for the day.
Oh,
It is
good.
all original content by me in very short sound bites, opposite phenomenal pictures of art, photography that give you a whole body experience with the words. So you see the picture, you get an impact. You see the words, you get an impact. You get both. You have something to think about the whole day, and it has
I love it.
280 pages, fully illustrated, full color. There's 12 chapters, and it's all about your emotional wellness, being a benevolent world citizen, finding your joy. And my favorite chapter is the last chapter, which is called Learn to Love the Endings, because I think sometimes we
It.
don't think of that as a positive
Mm.
element to building our joy. So if you buy the digital version, I make more money, but I recommend you buy the print version because it's phenomenal for bedside table, coffee table book to keep on your desk. People will comment on this book. It's gorgeous. Check it out. And I think you'll
I'm
be
getting
blessed.
one for myself. I'm buying some for family members, just by the way. I can think of 3 people that I
Awesome.
wanna
This
send
is
right now.
I was
So
gonna buy one for my agent for Christmas, and then one of my friends who has the same agent bought my book for him for Christmas. I was like, "You stole my thunder!" But he loves it. He's like, "I cherish your book. I cherish it."
That's awesome. Okay, so before you go, my last question, and I just wanna say I've had so much fun chatting with
Thank
you. I
you.
could have gone on and on, but I know, time limit and
Yes.
whatnot. But so last question, what are you sure of in life?
What am I sure of? Hmm. I am sure that nothing is hopeless, nothing is impossible, and you can make a difference.
So good. Thank you so
Thank you,
much for your
Jolie.
time,
It's been
Anne.
so
It's
beautiful.
been wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you, friends, for joining us. If you enjoyed the show, there are many more episodes and messages just like this that can be found on the Fresh Blood Killing It After 40 podcast, as well as the subsequent YouTube channel or at the joliedowns.com website. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful and fulfilling day.